Even more ICE raids are expected. This week, our cameras captured raids happening at San Antonio's immigration courts.
Meantime, last week, the Trump administration briefly paused immigration raids at hotels, restaurants, and farms across the country. But now the president has given ICE the green light to resume.
Hundreds of workers were taken into custody when federal ICE agents raided the H-E-B fresh food store in San Antonio's Stone Oak neighborhood. It happened without warning on a quiet Saturday morning that began like any other. Cars lined up outside coffee shops, parents ran errands with their children, and delivery trucks moved through the suburbs. Inside the grocery store, employees stocked fruit, arranged bakery trays, and prepared for the mid-morning rush.
A Homeland Security official says, quote, there will be no safe place for industries that harbor violent criminals or try to undermine ICE efforts.
Just after 10 o'clock, a convoy of black SUVs and unmarked vans rolled into the parking lot. The vehicles stopped in formation near the main entrance, and more than 35 agents stepped out wearing tactical vests marked ICE. In moments, the weekend calm disappeared and the store became the center of a large-scale federal operation. Inside, the shift was immediate. Agents spread out through the aisles, their movements practiced and deliberate. Customers stopped their carts and looked around as uniformed officers moved past them. The agents spoke quietly to store managers, secured the exits, and began a floor-by-floor sweep. The lockdown took 7 minutes. Under Homeland Security procedures, no one was allowed to leave or enter until verification teams finished the initial checks. Shoppers held onto children and phones, recording short clips that would later appear across local news channels. The hum of refrigeration units was the only sound that remained constant. Eyewitnesses said it looked organized, not chaotic. Employees were guided toward one section of the store near the stockroom. Federal personnel with clipboards began verifying names against a digital list transmitted from field headquarters. 9 workers were detained in the first phase. The moment handcuffs clicked, the rest of the staff was escorted outside. Around 120 people, including shoppers and store employees, were cleared from the main floor and directed to wait in the parking lot. The agents maintained calm communication, no raised voices, no rush, just the repetition of standard procedure. This raid was one part of a statewide campaign that had expanded quietly since 2022. ICE had launched more than 420 workplace inspections across Texas in grocery chains, distribution centers, and warehouses. San Antonio, with its growing logistics sector and food supply routes, had become a focal point. Federal data showed that enforcement operations in retail locations had tripled in 2 years. The Stone Oak raid represented both a continuation and an escalation of that trend. At the core of the operation were small teams carrying portable biometric scanners. Each device could capture fingerprints, cross-match data with the E-Verify system, and flag inconsistencies within seconds. These tools allowed agents to confirm employment eligibility without removing large numbers of records from the site. According to internal briefings, at least 5 mismatched profiles appeared during the first pass. That was enough to trigger a deeper inspection of the store's hiring files. For the agents, it was not an act of surprise, but the endpoint of a 3-month investigation that had built layer by layer. Homeland Security Investigations, the investigative branch of ICE, had begun its audit in late July after receiving anonymous tips about irregular Social Security entries. Payroll files contained duplicate identification numbers used across separate departments. Cross-checking these entries revealed inconsistencies between employment start dates and reported tax filings. Once those anomalies were confirmed, the HSI unit assembled an enforcement plan. The plan was authorized under Federal Statute 8 U.S.C., Paragraph 113-24A, which covers unlawful employment of non-citizens and outlines civil penalties that can reach $16,000 per worker. Before the operation, agents worked with the Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division and forensic accountants from the FBI. Their goal was to map how subcontractor chains connected to larger corporate hiring networks. Many retail chains rely on third-party contractors for cleaning, stocking, or delivery tasks, and those layers often create blind spots in verification. Investigators use that map to decide where to focus their sweep inside the store. In the command post parked outside, agents monitored live feeds from internal cameras. Every arrest was logged and timestamped, then transmitted to the San Antonio field office within 90 seconds. The entire process was treated as both enforcement and evidence collection. Boxes of paper files were photographed before being sealed and transported for review. Among the seized materials were employment ledgers, tax documents, and time card data showing repeated overtime entries tied to unverified names. These records suggested that hiring irregularities might extend beyond a single store, possibly involving other branches under the same management chain. While the paperwork was gathered, agents escorted the detained workers out through a side exit to minimize disruption in the front aisles. Each individual was processed through biometric verification again before being placed into transport vehicles. From the outside, shoppers saw the end result, but not the coordination behind it. Within an hour, the store's entrance reopened for limited customer access. Among those detained were 4 Mexican nationals and 5 Central American workers. Some had lived in Bezier County for more than 10 years. Several had children born in the United States and families residing in nearby neighborhoods. Outside the store, relatives and supporters gathered behind yellow tape. They held handmade cardboard signs that read, "Somos trabajadores, no criminales." Local reporters filmed short interviews as family members waited for updates. Advocacy groups such as Racist Texas arrived by noon. Their representatives said they intended to provide legal assistance and documentation checks. At the same time, local polls taken that afternoon by KENS 5 showed that 54% of residents supported the ICE action, citing the importance of following employment laws. Community sentiment was divided but steady. Some saw the raid as enforcement of regulation, others as disruption of livelihoods. Federal investigators opened a second line of inquiry the same afternoon. The focus shifted from workers to the company itself. Under the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986, every employer in the United States must verify the legal status of each hire. Compliance is not optional, and paperwork is as critical as payroll. The investigators wanted to know whether the violation at the Stone Oak H-E-B store came from negligence or intent. The difference determines whether fines are civil or criminal. Each store maintains its own set of I-9 employment forms, which confirm identity and work authorization. A team from Homeland Security Investigations arrived later in the day to collect the store's files. Early audits revealed problems. 12 I-9 forms were incomplete, missing signatures or verification numbers. Several employees had been hired through subcontractors that never ran their information through the federal E-Verify system. Those contractors operated independently, yet the law holds the primary employer accountable for all labor on site. This discovery widened the scope of the case. What began as a routine raid became a corporate audit. Agents documented every irregular entry and matched them to tax submissions from the same quarter. Payroll ledgers showed consistent payments to outside vendors without matching verification logs. That gap raised questions about internal oversight. If prosecutors can establish that managers knowingly allowed unauthorized workers to remain employed, the penalties will be significant. Civil fines could reach $1.8 million across all identified cases. If willful violation is proven, criminal liability becomes possible under federal statute. For large companies, the law allows both monetary penalties and temporary suspension of business licenses. HEB's legal department has already assigned compliance counsel to cooperate with federal investigators. The company's public statement confirmed cooperation but declined to comment on specifics. The announcement emphasized that employment procedures would be reviewed company-wide to ensure adherence to federal requirements. HEB operates more than 420 stores across Texas and employs about 145,000 workers. Each location manages its own hiring files, but follows centralized human resources protocols. A failure in one branch can expose the entire chain to scrutiny. Federal investigators will likely audit at least a dozen additional sites to determine whether similar issues exist elsewhere. For a retailer of this size, compliance gaps are a serious operational risk. Every delay in verification affects payroll, scheduling, and vendor contracts. A sustained investigation could slow supply lines that serve millions of customers every week. Labor economists are watching closely. Texas relies on one of the largest retail and logistics networks in the country. Enforcement on this scale may reshape how businesses recruit, verify, and retain workers. Analysts predict that large chains will tighten hiring systems and reduce subcontracting to limit liability. For smaller businesses, these audits may lead to higher administrative costs and slower onboarding. The broader labor market is already strained by post-pandemic shortages, and new layers of verification could add further delays. Employers that depend on flexible staffing for distribution and food handling will have to adjust quickly to avoid disruptions. The HEB operation is not an isolated event. It follows a clear pattern of increased workplace enforcement across San Antonio. Over the past 6 months, ICE teams have conducted at least 5 other raids targeting employers in different sectors. A warehouse near Loop 410 saw 12 workers detained during a night shift inspection. A downtown hotel faced 6 arrests in its housekeeping department. At a Northside restaurant, 3 employees were taken into custody after on-site verification showed mismatched identification numbers. Each action was planned separately, but stemmed from the same objective: auditing employment practices in industries that rely heavily on contract labor. Construction remains one of the primary targets. Earlier this year, a downtown high-rise project was inspected after anonymous reports suggested unauthorized hires. 17 workers were detained. Investigators found that many had been employed through subcontractor loops designed to hide undocumented labor behind multiple layers of contracting firms. Those structures make it difficult to trace responsibility, which is why federal agencies have begun to focus on the entire hiring chain rather than the immediate employer. ICE's San Antonio field office recorded 1,276 workplace detentions since 2023, a 42% increase over the previous year. That rise aligns with Washington's new national benchmark of 3,000 daily arrests announced by Border Policy Director Tom Homan. Multi-agency cooperation has expanded. The FBI now assists in tracing financial flows linked to fraudulent Social Security numbers. The Department of Labor reviews wage records to detect underpayment or duplicate identities. The IRS Criminal Investigations Division checks whether companies use false tax data to hide undocumented payrolls. These agencies share a unified data pipeline, creating a system that cross-references employment, tax, and criminal records in real time. Federal analysts describe San Antonio as a hub zone of mixed-status labor markets, where retail, food services, and logistics overlap. The city's economic structure provides a model for understanding how undocumented labor integrates into legal supply chains nationwide. Across the United States, the pattern is becoming clear. ICE conducted 6,400 worksite operations in the last fiscal year, a 58% increase from the previous administration. These actions resulted in 11,000 civil detentions and $72 million in employer penalties. Officials state that the goal is not volume, but deterrence. Each operation signals that verification systems must be enforced consistently. Supporters say that strict enforcement protects lawful wages and blocks trafficking networks that exploit vulnerable migrants through unsafe working conditions. They argue that enforcing employment law preserves competition among companies that follow regulations and prevents exploitation within the labor market. Do you think raids like this are necessary to enforce the law, or are they going too far? Tell us what you think in the comments, and don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more updates.